Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Tonight, I'm joined by the Executive Director for Republicans for National Renewal, Mark IVANYO. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Magdalene.
So I wanted to have you on because there has been a growth in the Republican Party and the conservative movement recently of populist organizations. And I think a concern amongst a lot of Republicans and conservatives about the fact that the party seems to be going in more of a liberal direction in some areas or more of a neocon direction in others. Just to start off, what does your organization do and how did it come to be?
Yeah, that's a great observation. What we do is we are a political nonprofit dedicated to moving the Republican Party away from the America Last establishment and more to the right towards the America First grassroots. And so that means taking over the Republican Party from the grassroots level up. So at the local, state, and federal levels, but not just at the Republican Party, but also the auxiliaries, such as the Young Republicans and affiliated groups, the College Republicans, et cetera, just the general Republican groups. And so we came to be because at the time when we first launched back in 2020, our inaugural event was at CPAC back when it was still in DC, 2020. And we didn't see, as me and a group of patriots, didn't really see any groups that were really committed to the Trump 2016 agenda. And we were very frustrated in that we saw President Trump go through 4 years of being thwarted at every turn in his agenda, not just by the Democrats, which was expected, but by people in his own party. And so we wanted to create this group to kind of exert influence and pressure on the Republican Party and kind of make it the party aware of where the grassroots are at, because the grassroots are very detached, frustrated, and frankly upset with the establishment GOP and where the direction's been going. And even to this day, I think it's culminating into this, it's a boiling pot, so to speak, where the grassroots really is just upset and exerting more pressure on the establishment of GOP, more so than we've probably ever seen in recent history.
And that's something not a lot of people are aware of, is that the grassroots of the conservative movement is very upset. They don't like necessarily what happened with how elections were handled last time. They don't like the way the Republican Party is going in terms of policy and the elevating of certain voices and the squashing of others. So at your organization, what is the main focus going into midterms and elections beyond that for the future of the Republican Party?
Sure. So our main focus is getting the right people in office. And so we've endorsed candidates. Some of our more recent endorsements was Jackson Lawmeyer for Senate out of Oklahoma. He's a fantastic patriot. And also Brian Cloudis for Florida State House, also a fantastic patriot. But we're we're vetting a lot of candidates and endorsing them and making sure the right people get in, because we are expecting a big red wave. But we want the right kind of big red wave, no pun intended. Because the establishment are lining up their candidates as well, and so they're funneling a lot of money to their candidates and trying to defeat the America First candidates. And so our position is to kind of support and get more attention to the right candidates first and foremost. And then another goal of ours is to mobilize the grassroots. So we have our grassroots director, Shane Trejo. He's doing fantastic work in Michigan, but he's kind of built up a template that we can use in any state. And so we're also focusing on Florida, Washington State. Texas is a big one as well, because Texas, people consider it a red state, which it is, but it's a establishment dominated state.
Right.
The Republicans are so complacent here. They're kind of like, well, I'll just run an establishment candidate. He's a Republican, he's going to win. And that's the problem, because the grassroots will hold their nose, look away, and reluctantly vote Republican for a lot of these candidates. And so we're hoping to turn that around to where you're not looking away and holding your nose, you're actually with a smile voting for your Republican candidate.
And that's an important point, because a lot of times it's the lesser of two evils when you go into the Republican primary. You're not necessarily voting for a candidate that actively excites you or whose policy platform actively excites you. In terms of these endorsements, I've seen some of them come out across your social media pages. What are the qualifications to be endorsed by your organization if you're a political candidate, if you're running for Senate? Where does someone have to fall ideologically or policy-wise?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I get it pretty often. we basically, first and foremost, we want to see what's the rhetoric like. You know, what are you supporting? What does your social media say? You know, maybe there's some people who were skeptical about Trump in 2016, but that's forgivable. I mean, a lot of people were. Once they saw what he did, then maybe they switched sides from the establishment to America First, and they've been America First since then. That's okay. Now, if they were just they decided to run for office, last year, and they were anti-Trump 100% until last year. Now that raises some red flags. But we look at the history, the rhetoric. If they've been in office, then we look obviously at the voting record and how they've done there. If they haven't been in office, then we just have to see the rhetoric, and then also who are they running against. And so it's a variety of factors. Sometimes you get two ostensibly good candidates. You know, they're both saying they're America First, and then there's, you know, it's a little more subjective.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, we do that, and then we give them a candidate survey, which goes through a variety of issues. So that way we have something in writing, so that, let's say somebody answers our survey very well. We do an interview with them. We ask them questions. They also answer those very well. Now they get into office. And as politicians are known to do, maybe they change their opinion on certain issues. Maybe they vote a different way. And people say, well, how could you endorse that person? Well, we have it in writing that they said they would not do that. And obviously
Right.
we can't control them. We're not their campaign managers. And so if they decide to do something different once they're in office, we can't help that. But we try to cover all the bases in that. We get it in writing. And if they were to change and start being rhinos once they're in office, or betray the America First movement, we would obviously call them out and point out that, hey, here's what you told us, and here's why we endorsed you, and now you changed ship. So we go through kind of a rigorous vetting process before endorsing. We want people to have faith and trust that when we endorse a candidate, they can be assured that that is a America First candidate.
I think that's important because obviously there's a complete lack of accountability that goes on in the Republican Party when people get into office and then vote for the antithesis of everything they campaigned on. And sort of in that vein, I saw on your website that you have, in some ways, a ranking or rating for a lot of members of Congress on the Republican side about their policies and what they're going for. So that scorecard, I think it was called. How does that work? How did that come to be? Because that's something that I think a lot of Republicans, a lot of people going into primary votes coming up, be very interested to see, because they might not necessarily understand that just because someone's saying they're America First or saying they're pro whatever policy, that they haven't been voting that way while they've been in office.
Yeah, I'm glad you saw that and you're asking about that, because we made that scorecard to show that, especially during President Trump's presidency, there were a lot of Republicans who would go and give these flowery speeches and say, "Oh yeah, I love Trump and his agenda. I support it 100%," and then they'd go and vote against him half the time.
Right.
And so that's how we developed that, was based on different issues, whether it's immigration, on big tech, on trade, et cetera. We saw how they voted and then compared that to President Trump's agenda. And that's how we scored them. And so that's on a Senate level. We want to also expand that to a state level too. I think that'd be very helpful for
Mhm.
anyone who's thinking about voting and it's a competitive race. They want to see who is voting in line with Trump's 2016 agenda, or what is also known as the America First agenda. And so I'd encourage your viewers to stay tuned, look at our website, because we definitely want to add that bit of information, kind of like a voter's guide, so to speak, when it comes to state and federal issues.
And in terms of volunteering for your organization, I saw there's a volunteer page on your website as well. And I know a lot of young conservatives are concerned going into midterms in 2024 about the lack of candidates maybe that are in the bench for the next presidential run. And so for people who want to volunteer in your organization, what kind of experience will they get? What will they be doing, especially for young people?
Yeah, so it depends on what their skill set is. I typically will defer volunteers to our grassroots director or one of the other directors, and they'll kind of see where there's a need. And so, you know, if someone's based out of Florida, then maybe we have some projects in Florida going on, and they can go and help out a candidate, whether it's block walking, showing up to their events, Maybe they're in Washington State and there's a different project going on. So it really just depends, and that's why we do it kind of on an individual basis. If a volunteer reaches out and they say, you know, I like to help out however I can. Um, Obviously, we can't tell them, well, why don't you fly out to Texas, even though you're in California? But if you're in California and we're doing something there, then we'd love your help. Or maybe they have some graphic design skills and we'd like them to help out at our next event so they can do a promo graphic. Maybe they're a photographer and we'd love to have them at one of our events taking pictures or doing videos. So it really just depends on the skill set, but we're definitely open to anyone who wants to volunteer. And I know that we went to TPA USA Student Action Summit last year. And I mean, we had numerous young folks who would come to us and say, you know, we love your mission. We want the Republican Party to move more towards America first. How can we help? Where do I sign up? And so it was really promising. It was really optimistic. I think, especially with the younger crowd who grew up kind of in this PC culture, it's nice to see them kind of turn away from that and see the establishment for what it is and kind of be involved, but they really want to help out and really appreciate our mission.
And with that mission, it seems to be very centered around the 2016 Trump platform. You push a lot of the quotes from Trump at that period of time, and that seems what it comes back to. A lot of Republican organizations have not necessarily been talking about the 2016 platform, but more the 2020 platform that Trump ran on, or different things Trump discussed at that point. Why is there such a focus on the 2016 platform, other than the fact that it obviously was successful in getting Trump elected?
Well, I think the 2016 platform is more national populist, to be frank. I think it's more, you know, he's very stern and outspoken on the immigration issue. Securing the border was a priority, and also the putting the American worker first, and also having that interesting overlap that was unexpected with Bernie Sanders when it came
Yes.
to the American worker and immigration, where he said, well, at one point, even Bernie Sanders supported reducing even legal immigration to help out the American worker, and also having the corporations bring manufacturing back to America as opposed to outsourcing all of it. Being against the TPP deal, which was a disastrous deal. I think it was just, yeah, the 2016 message was overall more national populist, whereas 2020 it was more like they're tough on crime, but also criminal reform. So the message seemed a little more tenuous compared to 2016. I mean, obviously, it was still Trump, he was still good, but I think that the 2016 also is symbolic in that it was probably the first time in American history where that national populism gate was open.
Right.
Usually, you know, we never had that in America until President Trump opened that door. He took the arrows, he took the fire, and he kind of forged that path so that other Republicans would feel comfortable saying, well, yeah, I kind of agree. Yeah, we should put our country first. Imagine that. And so that's why it's so symbolic of the 2016 campaign, is that it was a landmark achievement in America to do what, and a lot of other, you know, European countries have already been doing for centuries, like Hungary, some parties in Italy, these kind of nationally populist, Poland, for example, they've been putting their country first for a while now. But in America, 2016 was probably the first time we've done that.
Yes, it's definitely true. It was a huge shift in Republican politics and American politics. You've been going to quite a few conservative organizations and events, and I was wondering, what has the reception been like for your organization in the conservative movement? Because there was quite a lot of infighting that goes on. There's quite a lot of challenges to where are we going to be on a policy level. So how has your organization and its message of America First populism been received throughout the conservative movement in your view?
Well, Magdalene, we have been surprised at every event we've done. It has exceeded internal expectations every single time. And we'll even have people who may be more towards establishment, but they're curious,
Mhm.
and they'll come by and I'll get messages for weeks following our event saying, hey, that was fantastic, really enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next one. I think that it wasn't so much that our ideas and speakers are unpopular, it's more so that they're not heard very much. And so
Right.
once they are heard and people come by, uh, just a moderate Republican comes by, I think they will appreciate it, even if they disagree on some issues. And maybe I've had some people message me and say, "Well, I like a lot of what y'all stand for, but I may disagree on this one issue, or whether it's immigration or a social issue." And we talk about it a little bit, but overall, it's a very positive reception. And yeah, there's times where we were a little late in planning because plans changed within the main event itself, but we still had no problem selling tickets or getting people over at our events because people have a yearning for that message. Even the people who you might think of as rhinos, or at least they're just not that involved. Once they hear the message, I think they prefer that over this kind of status quo or even a soft Republican message.
And going forward, obviously, we're revving up to midterms now in 2024. There's a lot of questions about where the main strength for the Republican Party is in terms of policy. Where do you think is the main strength in terms of policy for the Republican Party? Is it being more isolationist, more America first, or is there any validity to trying to go into the more moderate area, in your opinion?
I think immigration is always a big one. We have brought in more immigrants than any other country. We have continued to bring them in even during so-called COVID lockdowns, which is kind of
Mhm.
insane to most normal people. So I think that immigration moratorium is a more popular idea now. Uh, First of all, it would stop the influx of immigration, period. But first of all, control illegal immigration, which we haven't done. But if we could do that, facilitate deportations, but then also put a temporary halt on legal immigration, because we have had so many immigrants come here. How do you give them time to assimilate when you have much more coming, and then you have these pockets of different cultures who are separate from the current culture? They don't get a chance to assimilate. It creates division. I think a lot of just regular working class Americans are seeing that and they're supporting that. So I think the Republican Party can promote the idea of, hey, immigration moratorium for now. We need to get our house in order. Our southern border is a disaster. We have illegals all over there. We have gangs like MS-13, other criminals peddling drugs. I mean, all kinds of things, sex trafficking, etc., which is really news companies do not speak about that enough. Being in Texas, I see and hear about it a
Yeah.
lot more. But if you're somewhere in the Northeast, you don't hear about sex trafficking and drugs on the southern border. You'd have to really search hard to hear about it. And so once people hear about that, I think the immigration moratorium will be popular. I think also getting woke capitalism under control. The censorship going on in the media or in the social media is insane. We had Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was permanently banned recently. And there's a lot of silence from Republicans who you think would be
Mhm.
very vocal about this. I think there's only been a handful of Republicans talking about it. So I think normal people are seeing this and thinking, hey, this isn't very cool. And why isn't anyone doing anything about it? So I think if they can fight against woke big tech and woke corporations in general, and then also talk about immigration some more because it's been so out of control to an unprecedented level as of late, I think it would really get some traction and momentum coming into 2022.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially because we've seen success, at least on campaigning on those issues in the past. And the further the Republican Party got, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you can notice that the further the Republican Party got from that, the bigger losses they took, especially when it came to the presidency. Thank you so much for coming on. How can people find your organization or get involved?
Sure, I appreciate it, Magdalene. So you can follow us on Twitter and Getter at RN Renewal. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Republicans for National Renewal. I'm also on Twitter and Getter at Mark IVANYO, also on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is Marco_I_24. And so please check us out. Our website is rnrenewal.org. Also a great resource, and appreciate y'all for tuning in.
Thank you. And we'll link all that below. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Magdalene. Take care.